To my beloved brothers and sisters in Palestine, Assalamu alaikum. I don't even know where to begin. My heart is heavy as I write this, but I know I need to speak. I need you to hear the voice of someone who may be far in distance, but whose heart beats with yours in every moment, in every scream, every prayer, every tear that falls from your blessed eyes. These months, these heartbreaking, unimaginable months have changed me forever. Every image, every video, every voice note from the heart of Gaza has left an imprint on my soul that will never fade. The things you have endured, no words could ever capture it, and no human heart could remain unaffected. And yet, you remain strong, you remain dignified, you remain upright, while the rest of the world stumbles in silence, in cowardness, in betrayal. You've lost your homes, your families, your limbs, your land, but not your faith, not your courage, not your love. Wallahi, you are the bravest people I have ever known. You've shown us what it really means to be human, what it means to be a father who stands between his child and a missile, a mother who births her baby beneath falling bombs and still manages to sing lullabies through the sound of drones, a child who smiles despite not knowing if tomorrow will come. You've shown us what it means to love Allah, to trust Him in the face of fire, and to walk through grief with your heads held high and your tongues soaked in zikr. You have changed us, all of us. You've exposed the lies we used to believe. You've shown us the hypocrisy of leaders, the emptiness of politics, the silence of so many we once called friends. Through your suffering, Allah has uncovered the truth in our own hearts. Now we see who stands with justice and who turns away from it. You've helped us see clearly, and I want to say from the depths of my soul, thank you. Thank you for waking us up. Thank you for reminding us what matters. Thank you for not giving up, even when the world turned its back on you. Thank you for being the proof that faith is more powerful than any weapon on earth. Palestine, you are not just a place on a map. You are a living, breathing soul to me. A soul that has bled and wept and still stood tall. I want you to know this. You are not alone. I see you. I hear you. I carry you with me in every prayer, in every conversation, in every protest, in every restless night, where I cry and cry, wishing I could do more. Sometimes I feel helpless and I cry out to Allah, Ya Allah, send them aid, break the siege, give them victory. But I know Allah sees, Allah knows. And I believe with every fiber of my being that this pain is not forever, that justice is not a fantasy, that your freedom is written, that the day is coming, inshallah, when the chains will break and your land will breathe again. And when that day comes, I will be there. I will be there with my children and my grandchildren, and we will sit at a table with you. A table where there is no hunger, no loss, no fear, only laughter, only light, only love. I will embrace you. I will kiss your hands. I will cry into your shoulders. I will walk bare feet on your soil, and I will whisper into the ground, you are free now. And I dream of Al-Aqsa, how I long to stand where you stood, to pray where your martyrs once bowed, to feel the pulse of the land you protected with your lives. I long to plant olive trees with you, to drink coffee under the sun of a free Palestine, to sing, to dance, to remember, to live, truly live beside you. Until that day comes, and it will come. Please know this from one sister to all of you. My home is your home. My food is yours. My heart is open. My prayers will never stop. You are part of me. You are the best of this ummah. You are the soul of our struggle. You are the light that refuses to go out, and as long as I breathe, I will carry you with me. Palestine, I love you. I respect you.
Welcome to the launch, the inaugural meeting of the new organization, One State Palestine, giving a physical form to the demand made by millions of people in Britain and around the world that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This is, of course, a slogan impossible if the current situation in Palestine continues to obtain, but it's also impossible if we even miraculously returned to the status quo ante. The status quo ante being the total blockade of Gaza and the total occupation of the rest of Palestine and the rapacious building of settlements on the land that the so-called two-state solution had clearly designated as being Palestinian territory. In other words, everybody knows, even those who pay lip service still to it, that the so-called two-state solution, which wasn't in any case a solution, is as dead as a dodo. And therefore, we think it is time to raise the banner of one state in Palestine, where one man, one woman, and one vote is the order of the day. A state in Palestine in which the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews that chose to remain there would be equal citizens under the law. And it would necessarily imply the dismantling of the whole system of Zionism, the whole system of settler colonialism that the Palestinian people have endured, and indeed the people of the surrounding Arab countries have endured for almost 80 years. This is not a new policy. And for me, it feels like deja vu. When I entered the Palestinian cause in 1975, precisely 50 years ago, half a century ago, the banner we raised was one democratic state in Palestine. And it was only in later years, as the balance of power in the world began to change, as the balance of force in the Middle East began to change, that the so-called two-state solution began to be first floated and then adopted by many people, including, I should say, in the interests of candor, including myself. I supported the Oslo Agreement. because my good friend, President Arafat, whom I had close association with from the 1970s until his demise, persuaded me not only that this was the best that they could achieve, but that it would be dynamic. It would prove dynamic, that once the Palestinian armed force had returned to the land, the political and military situations would change. None of that came to pass. There is no two states. When people say to me, the two-state solution is what I support, I ask them, where is this two-state solution? The Oslo Agreement is more than 40 years ago, and not 1 centimeter of Palestine is free. And moreover, the Oslo Agreement made no provision, indeed specifically excluded, the millions of Palestinians around the world as refugees, the lucky ones perhaps in America or Canada, the unlucky ones in the surrounding Arab countries, eking out now a third or even fourth generation of life in absolute despair and poverty in the refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan, in Syria and elsewhere. The people in the Gaza Strip are almost all refugees. They have to look at their own country through the wire when they can see through the smoke, the fog of war, endless war. How many children have perished in the last 21 months who have lived their entire lives under shot and shell? Never a moment's peace, never a day of security, never a day of clean water, abundant food, ample medical care, and the kind of things that children everywhere should have as their natural birthright. So there is no two-state solution. Millions of people support the demand that from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. So we believe, my colleagues and I, that it's time to give that concrete form. I'm not going to criticize or attack any other organizations, but I will be able to say, without fear of contradiction, that this organization will be the only organization in Britain openly campaigning for a single state in Palestine. And if that's your cup of tea, if that's what you think is the only possible solution to the decades, now nearly a century of misery and devastation, if you think this demand is the only way forward, then you should fight for it alongside us. We have become almost inured, I hope never entirely inured, to the agony of the Palestinian people. I'm watching as the Holy Family Church in Gaza is attacked by an Israeli tank, apparently by accident. They drove a tank right up to the church and aimed their cannon at the cross itself. The Pope's reaction is wholly inadequate. The reaction of the local hierarchy in Palestine is far closer to what there needs to be. Throughout all of Christendom, there ought to be a hue and cry about the attack on the Christian village in Taibe, which set it on fire, a village so old that Jesus himself may well have walked along its cobbled streets. The attack on the Holy Family Church in Gaza was no accident. They have attacked it multiple times before. 3 parishioners are dead as a result of this week's attack. 9 are wounded, including the parish priest himself, a personal friend of the late Pope Francis. They have bombed and shelled Christian places. They have harassed and attacked Christian places, even in the old city of Jerusalem. The Christians in Palestine are being pogromed by the Zionist state of Israel. And that ought to arouse the ire, the anger, and the outright condemnation of every person who considers themselves to be a Christian. And Netanyahu this week has made plain that not only does Israel not intend to give away 20% of their territory to a Palestinian state, they are intent on building a greater Israeli state. They have no intention of stopping until the old Zionist cause of from the Nile to the Euphrates, from Egypt to Iraq, until that becomes a greater Israel. They have no intention of stopping. They are occupying a part of Lebanon. They are occupying, and this week have announced they intend to permanently occupy the southern part of Syria. They are, of course, occupying the Palestinian territories in total. They are responsible for the crimes against the Palestinian people, even within the 1948 borders. Even though these people have Israeli passports, they have no normal rights. So we cannot, of course, dictate to the Palestinian people what the final outcome of their struggle should be or will be, but we have a right to say that our intellectual conclusion is that the two-state solution, which was never a solution because it did not bring back the refugees, is dead. And therefore, there should be a new era, a new form of struggle in Britain, in solidarity with the Palestinian people throughout the world. And we believe that one state, Palestine, is that form. I'm going to hand over now to my good friend and colleague, Chris Williamson, former Member of Parliament, parliamentary colleague of mine, who was disgracefully treated when he was a Labour Member of Parliament and was driven out of the party. And I'm proud to say Chris Williamson is now the deputy leader of the Workers' Party. And I'll ask him to take the floor. Chris, over to you.
Thanks very much for that introduction, George. And you've set the case, I think, very eloquently for why this campaign is absolutely essential. It's a campaign, in my opinion, that is long, long overdue. In my opinion, Israel, from its very foundation, was an abomination. It was created out of terrorism, at least a 30-year-long terrorist campaign where British soldiers were murdered and tortured by these Zionist terrorists. Indeed, the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, was himself a terrorist. And of course, when Israel was established, it was established on the backs of the Palestinian people. At least 750,000 Palestinian people were displaced, made refugees, have never been given the right to return to their homes, which were subsequently occupied by these Zionist terrorists, which I think is an apt description for them. So in my opinion, Israel could never have been established in the first place. I think it was achieved following the horrors of the Second World War and the Nazi Holocaust, and the Palestinian people were effectively made to pay for the crimes that were committed by the Nazis during that horrific period. But it was created, and a border was established, agreed by the UN. Not content with that, I think it was in 1949 they made a land grab and displaced more Palestinian people. Still discontent, they made a further land grab in 1967. And I think another important point, which is worth bearing in mind, why I believe this campaign is so essential and why I also believe it is so long overdue, is that people are now obviously very, very aware of the appalling genocide which has been perpetrated by the Zionist entity for getting on for 2 years now, shortly. But massacres and war crimes and the abuse of the Palestinian people is not a new phenomenon. This is something which stretches right back to the very foundation of Israel all those years ago. And if you look in the records, you'll see massacre after massacre after massacre of the Palestinian people. And of course, Gaza has borne a large brunt of that. The Zionist entity used to refer to these periodic bombardments of Gaza as mowing the lawn. Absolutely despicable attitude towards the Palestinian people. But the notion of a two-state solution, as you said, George, I mean, it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. It was never meant to happen, and it's impossible for it to happen now because the Zionists have atomized the West Bank. I mean, I pointed out in 1967 the further land grab. They're in breach of so many international law now in regard to the way in which they've conducted themselves over the years. But you now look at these settlements. You look at the West Bank. You look at the map of the West Bank. I mean, where would the Palestinian state actually be located? So it's a total non-starter, in my opinion. And of course, the Zionist regime has doubled down in its attitude towards the Palestinian people. And in 2018, they passed the nation state law, which basically said that Israel was for the Jews. And so although there are some non-Jewish citizens in Israel, they are very much second-class citizens, always have been, but to an even greater extent today. So I think it's really important that we make the case for the self-determination of the Palestinian people. They've been abused and slaughtered for 76, 77 years now. And enough is enough. The two-state solution is a non-starter. There should be self-determination for the Palestinian people. And the only credible and sustainable solution, it seems to me, therefore, is a one-state solution, as set out in your opening remarks, George. And I think in parallel with that, we obviously need to ensure that the Zionist entity is completely dismantled. But I suspect that many of the people the Israelis who are there now, were a one-state solution to be achieved, would leave. I mean, most of them came from Eastern Europe. They're still coming from Eastern Europe and the United States of America. They have no roots in reality, despite the propaganda, in Palestine. And on that basis, I think, they would, in my opinion, leave the country. But those that remain, I think it would be essential that there would be a de-Zionization process to de-radicalize the people, because we know from the opinion polls that the overwhelming majority of the Israeli population are genocidal. They very much support the activities, the tactics which have been pursued by the regime in Gaza, and obviously in the West Bank. We're seeing it extended to that as well now. And so, as we saw at the end of the Second World War with a denazification process in Germany, I think a similar process would need to be implemented in order to de-radicalize the current Israeli population that were, if they were indeed to decide to stay behind. I don't think it would be appropriate or fair to expect the Palestinians to live cheek by jowl with the settlers who have done so much damage and have treated them with such contempt and brutality for 70 odd years now, to simply allow them to, as it were, live side by side without any sort of process, a reconciliation process, to enable a sustainable one state to prevail. So I think that's where we're at, George. A long overdue campaign. I think it's very clear that we need to make the case and stand up for the self-determination of the Palestinian people. I think this is an idea whose time is long overdue, an idea whose time has come. And I think it's an idea, although it won't be popular with the political class in this country, I think it will be very popular with the vast majority of the British public who have taken an interest in this issue. And indeed, not just the British public, but people all over the world. I mean, you said millions of people are on side. I think the figure is probably billions of ordinary people around the world actually identify with the Palestinian people and want to see justice for the Palestinian people. And I think this campaign is one step along that road.
Thank you very much, Chris. A characteristically spirited and well-argued inaugural address. I'm sure you and I and our next speaker will make many such addresses as long as this campaign, which will be a long one and a hard road, but we are determined to travel it. You touched on two things that I would like to address. The first was the potential international nature of this campaign. Although this is a Workers' Party of Britain initiative, it is not, definitively not, restricted to members or supporters of the Workers' Party of Britain. We invite all supporters of the Palestinian cause to join us, to follow us on social media in due course, to join us, to affiliate with us, to work for the affiliation of civic society organizations, trade union branches, and so on. But we also are not restricted to Britain. Britain, as we both know, has a very special responsibility in this catastrophe, this Nakba, because it was our Prime Minister, Balfour, who, on behalf of one people, promised a second people the land that belonged to a third people without consulting any of the three peoples involved. The British people were not consulted as to whether they, in fact, most British people didn't have the vote at the time that this proposal was made by Balfour to the Zionist movement. The Jewish people were not consulted because at that time, in 1917, the vast majority of Jewish people were not Zionists, and indeed millions of them viscerally opposed Zionism. And of course, least consulted of all were the people whose territory was being given away by the British Prime Minister, a territory which, by the way, Britain didn't even possess on the day that that declaration was made. So, although Britain has a special place, and Keir Starmer is nailing that special place down over and over again by his unequivocal, without qualification, support for Zionism, for Israel. This is a worldwide movement. And so we invite people from all over the world to join and support and follow this campaign. And by all means, to proliferate it all over the world. Our next speaker, if Chris and I are the cutting edge of, if you like, political work on this, our next speaker is our intellectual authority. Professor David Miller is not just a gifted academic, writer, and speaker, but he also won the landmark decision last year before an industrial tribunal, which proved the case that anti-Zionism is a protected political characteristic. In other words, you cannot be sacked for being an anti-Zionist. I have been an anti-Zionist all of my life. No one ever sacked me for it. Chris Williamson is an anti-Zionist, but the Labour Party sacked him for it. But Bristol University were ruled to have acted unlawfully in sacking Professor David Miller for his anti-Zionist views. He's a hero for us, and we believe he's an intellectual authority of the highest level. And it's my pleasure to give him the floor now. Professor Miller, please address the inaugural meeting of One State Palestine.
Thank you very much, George, for those kind words. Look, I've been studying Zionism for some time now, as I'm sure many people know. I think it was the reason I was sacked from my post as Professor of Political Sociology. But since I've been sacked, I've said this many times since then, I wanted to thank the Zionist movement essentially for allowing me to have the time and the energy to spend almost all of my time studying Zionism and finding things about Zionism which I never imagined when I was sacked. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and I guess that the research that I do is a key element of the way in which I discuss these things. So some of the things I say, I know people find the things that I say sometimes, I mean, breathtaking or shocking or surprising. But quite often what we find when we discuss these things is that when you discuss the evidential basis for talking about Zionism as a form of racism, as a intrinsically colonial, intrinsically genocidal ideology, people start to understand that. And they start to understand that because you quote the evidence, but also partly they start to understand that, and people have started to understand that because of the sheer number of dead bodies that they have seen on their social media over the last year and a half, such that we find, as Chris was saying, that the overwhelming majority of people who pay attention to this are now of the opinion that Israel has no right to exist. Now, that is a sea change in how public opinion has operated. There was an opinion poll earlier this year which showed that a majority of young people now believe that Israel has no right to exist and it should be abolished. And we are now on the crest of a wave of hatred and a disdain for the Zionist project and for the practical applications of Zionism, which of course is dead children on our television screens every day. So I suppose that I wanted to say something about my conception of Zionism. I think both George, you and Christopher have given us an account of what happened in the Nakba, of the way in which the Zionist entity has tried to go for land grab after land grab. And I think it's important that we focus on that kind of dimension to Zionism. Zionism is a maximalist territorial ideology, and it's always had the conception of a greater Israel. So not just a greater Israel in the sense of 48 Israel plus Gaza, plus the West Bank, but also the conception that they wanted to have Lebanon and Syria and Iraq, or most of Iraq and Jordan, parts of Egypt, even little bits of Turkey, all the way up to effectively Europe. And people, I think, have begun to understand that that's the project which the Zionists are now trying to fulfill. We see it, of course, in their attempted invasion of Lebanon and their continued occupation of parts of Lebanon, although they were forced to withdraw from large parts of it. We see it in their occupation in Syria, 20 kilometers from Damascus, and of course the regular bombing of Syria, including just in the last couple of days. And we see it in the way in which they engage with other nations. For example, the conflict they've had with Iran recently. There's an attempt to expand the territory of Israel. And I think that means that what we're seeing is an attempt by Israel to become an imperialist power. And that's not something I think many of us have thought about in the past, but that is the reality, that Israel is attempting to become and imperialist power. And that's why it feels the need to try and expand its influence in West Asia, especially, of course, through normalization, through the Abraham Accords, the relationships with the United Arab Emirates and with the Saudis, but also why it feels the necessity, as everybody knows, to influence the politics of other countries outside of West Asia. So in Germany, in France, in the UK, in the US, everyone knows about AIPAC, and everyone knows, of course, about Epstein and what Epstein was doing for the Mossad or for Israeli military intelligence. So this attempt to influence the policies of other countries has been, I guess one could say, successful. I mean, the extent to which all Western countries now have adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which is a Zionist regime project, is the extent to which Israel has been able to influence the politics and culture of other countries. And that's, I think, important to understand when we're talking about the need to collapse and dismantle the Zionist entity. Of course, we need to do that. Of course, that is the prerequisite for peace in West Asia. But if we simply do the dismantling in West Asia and we don't think about what we do about Zionism in the UK or in Russia or in the US after that, then we will have a very big problem. So I think that what we need to think about at this very early stage of this campaign is how you talk about and how you discuss and how you research and write about the de-Zionization of British politics, of American politics, of French politics and German politics, because that's also required. Chris said that many of the settlers came from Eastern Europe, and that, of course, is true. But many of them came also, let's remember, from the US and from the UK. I've been doing research in the last couple of months on Zionism in Scotland, and the number of people who became settlers prior to and after 1948 from Scotland is quite stunning, surprising, to me at least. So that's a process we have to think about. How do we de-Zionize British society? And when the end of the Zionist entity comes, people think about some of the colonists going back to Hungary or Poland or Lithuania. But of course, many of them will come back to the UK, to France, to America. There are already 8,000 or 9,000 French citizens fighting in the occupation forces. There are perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 British citizens. Many of these people will come back to the UK, and we have to think about how we deal with that as the process goes forward. So I think it's important for us to think not just about de-Zionization in West Asia and in Palestine, but also about how we accomplish de-Zionization in the UK and in the US and everywhere else. And that's what I would like to see a discussion opening up about the process of de-Zionization in this country. Because, of course, one of the key drivers of Islamophobia in this country is the Zionist movement. They've been pushing the idea of Islamophobia for a long time, the idea of Islamic terrorism, the idea of Islamic extremism. These are ideas which come into the Western political elite in large part, not only, but in large part from Zionist intellectuals, including directly from Benjamin Netanyahu himself at a famous conference back in 1984. So I think it's important, yes, to think about how we understand Zionism, how we think of it as an ideology which is fundamentally racist and genocidal and colonial, but also how we think about that process of de-Zionization practically in Palestine, but also here as well.
Thank you, Professor Miller, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in to all or part of this broadcast, this inaugural launch meeting of One State Palestine. The labels that you've seen on the screen tell you our address as far as social media is concerned, tell you where our website is, how you can join us, affiliate with us, and support our work. Indeed, join in with it. This is not intended to be a top-down affair. We encourage each and every person who cares for Palestine anywhere in the world to make themselves a part of the one state Palestine movement. It's a movement. It started by the Workers' Party. It must not finish there. The state capture of the United States political process, the state capture of the British political process, and though I know less about it, I presume the state capture by Zionism of the legislatures, parliaments, and political class right across the Western world is virtually absolute. It must be. Otherwise, those countries would not have been able to continue funding, covering for, shilling in the media, and giving money and weapons to what is a veritable genocide, a veritable Holocaust. Yet it is one that is supported to a greater or lesser degree, but mainly a greater degree, by virtually every single government in the Western world. Even although the public opinion in all of those countries, including the United States of America, is steadily and comprehensively marching in the opposite direction, their governments are still supporting the genocide, the Holocaust in Gaza, with all of their might. Indeed, are changing our own laws in our own countries in order to protect Zionism, in order to protect Israel. In Britain, people are being arrested for holding up placards saying that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, even though the law that was passed does not make that an offense yet. But it's the direction of travel. And if we do not mobilize masses of our people to halt this unending support for genocide, for Zionism, for Israel, we will end up losing our freedoms altogether in my country and maybe also in yours. So we have a vital interest in fighting to end our country's complicity in the greatest crime of the 21st century so far, and one of the greatest crimes in all history. We all know about it. None of us can pretend that we don't. In the Holocaust, in the late 1930s and through the 1940s until the defeat of fascism, people were able, some credibly, to claim they did not know what was happening in that Holocaust. We have no such alibi. Every one of us knows what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. Every one of us knows what our governments are doing to assist them in doing so. So this is a vital national and international moral and political duty that we have to come together and concretize that great slogan, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, but only if we can win a one-state Palestine solution. Thanks for watching. I look forward to meeting you on the campaign trail. Good night.